In Chapter 5, we bring together demand and supply to talk about how they interact and how they can help us understand how markets operate, how changes take place in the market, and in particular, the role of prices. All right, think back for a moment to the very first day of class, the very first video that we did. We talked about the iPencil story. Right, and the interesting thing about the iPencil story is that the emphasis there was the idea that people's behavior is coordinated, even though no one person is the overarching designer. Right, no one knows how to make a pencil, yet pencils get made, and we now can have a better sense of how that coordination takes place. One of the keys, not the only way, but one of the key ways in which that people's behavior is coordinated in the marketplace is through the price system and how prices depend upon supply and demand. And in particular, what I want to argue for a little bit here is the idea that prices are knowledge surrogates, right? That is, that what prices do is tell us about buyers and sellers. They tell buyers and sellers information about other buyers and sellers. That is, prices enable us to know things that we otherwise wouldn't know. And that's this idea of prices being knowledge surrogates. When prices move around, they tell us about the relative scarcity of different goods, right? We know that when prices go up, for example, a good has become more scarce. Either the demand for that good has increased or the supply has shrunk. The good's more valuable. And when the price goes up, that indicates to us that we need to change our behavior in ways to compensate for the fact that the good's more valuable. How are we going to use it more carefully? To what uses will we devote it, and so forth. What's interesting about this is, but in the marketplace, we don't need to explain ourselves, right? We don't need to be able to communicate completely to other people what it is that we're doing and why and how it is that we know things in the marketplace. Prices do that for us. Prices play this communicative role. They are surrogate substitutes for knowledge. We don't need to know exactly what other people know. We can look at prices and it's sort of as if we know what it is that they know. And what's really important about this is that much of the knowledge that's relevant to economic decision making is not knowledge that can be easily communicated in words or numbers. You might think, well, wait a second, why don't we just, if the whole point of what markets do is to communicate information, we have an internet, right? Why don't we have people type all this information in and we can share it around? We don't need markets and prices. We can use computers to solve these problems and figure out what it is people want and how best to produce it and so on. That's tempting, but the problem, of course, is that much of the knowledge, again, that is relevant is not something that we can put into words or numbers, not something that we can articulate. And the way we might think about this is that we can divide knowledge up into two kinds of knowledge. There's what we might call articulate knowledge, which is the things that we can say. 2 + 2 = 4. The capital of Indiana is Indianapolis, right? These sorts of things that you can think of them as facts if you want, but things that we can put easily into words or numbers. But there's also things that we know that we can't put into words or numbers so easily. For example, how do you keep your balance on a bicycle? If you can ride a bike, you're actually solving implicitly some complicated physics equations there. Yet you can't articulate exactly what it is that you know, right? You're able to do it, you can do it, but you can't say exactly what it is that you know. If any of you can drive a standard shift, a stick shift car, right? Think about how you know when to pull off the clutch, right? That's the hardest thing to learn when you learn how to drive. How do you know when to pull off the clutch, right? If you pull off too early, right? The engine, the transmission falls out. If you pull out too late, car goes ring, right? Makes all kinds of crazy noises. How do you know, right? How do you know when it's okay to pull your foot off the clutch? And the answer is you just know, right? It's hard to explain. In fact, I don't think you can explain it, but you do know it. Right? And if you have musical skill or athletic skill, you're able to do things faster than your sort of conscious brain can recognize it. And you know things, right? You have this kind of knowledge that you can't easily express in words or numbers. And in fact, in the marketplace, entrepreneurs, especially ones who've been in business for a long time, have this kind of tacit, inarticulate knowledge that they've developed from experience over time, where they know things, but they can't always say exactly what it is that they know. And so when we think about what happens in the marketplace, when we decide to buy or sell or not buy or sell, right? We are making all of this knowledge, in particular that inarticulate tacit knowledge, available for other people to use. When we buy something and we push up the price a little bit, that tells other people, hey, this good is more valuable. You need to be more careful about how you use it. You need to think about whether you're devoting it to the uses that you think are most valuable. As the book describes it, markets are processes of competing bids and offers, right? As we think about how demanders bid for different goods, how suppliers make offers for different goods, right? All that's happening in the marketplace are these bids and offers going back and forth. And that process of bids and offers, of competing bids and offers, makes knowledge available to others even if we can't articulate that knowledge, or even if we can't put it very easily into words or into numbers. So what does this have to do with supply and demand? How do we put this together? Well, a couple things to note, right? What supply and demand ultimately are, right, are a process of cooperation, right? That suppliers and demanders are trying to figure out how do we provide the goods that other people want. And for that cooperation to happen, one of the things we have to be aware of is that transaction costs matter. We didn't talk about it in any of the lectures, but it was covered in an earlier chapter, this idea of transaction costs, right? The costs of finding people to trade with, of arranging trades, of writing contracts and enforcing them, and so on, right? That those are important. And the lower that transaction costs are, the easier it is to find trading partners and to make trades and so on, the more trades that will take place, the more bids and offers that will take place, and the wealthier people will be as they find themselves acquiring more of the things that they want. All right? And so one of the most important things to think about when we think about how well supply and demand works is the question of transaction costs. And clearly defined property rights, well-enforced property rights, and other well-developed institutions, including, for example, the role of money, are really important to keeping transaction costs low. People need to know that their property that the property rights will be defended and enforced, that they can trade with those things. Once we know I have confidence in those institutions, then we can engage in that competing process of bids and offers. Money is important here too, because when we have sound money, and money enables us to have everything to have one price, and that price enables us to formulate budgets and to calculate profits and losses, things we'll talk about in later chapters. But just keep in mind how important that is for people deciding what they want to do, how they want to do it, what sorts of trades that they want to make. So when we begin to actually think about putting supply and demand together, right, we can think about visually what happens when we look at the two curves. And so if we go back to my whiteboard here, right, we have supply and demand together on there. We have the upward sloping supply curve, the downward sloping demand curve. Notice the part in orange there. I've identified what we call the market clearing price, P star, and the market clearing quantity, Q star, right? The intersection of that supply and demand curve at P star and Q star is, again, what we call market clearing. And the best way to think about that, I think, is to recognize that at that point, the plans of sellers are fully coordinated with the plans of buyers. At that price, P star, everyone who wants to buy the good at that price finds a unit of the good available from sellers, and every seller who wants to sell at that price is able to find a buyer to buy those units of that good. That is, everyone finds a partner at market clearing. All right? All their plans are fully coordinated. Given that price, the quantity that people wish to purchase is exactly equal to the quantity that people wish to sell. And that's this idea, again, of the market clearing price and quantity. Again, the best way to think about that, I think, is this idea of full coordination, right? The plans of buyers and sellers are fully coordinated. One of the things we might think about is what happens when the price is above or below that market clearing price. So, for example, let's go back and suppose the price is stuck, right, at something below market clearing, right, like right here. Okay, if that price is sort of temporarily stuck there, what's going to happen? Well, at a price below market clearing, right, we'll have lots of people who want to buy the good. The quantity demanded will be very high at that low price. But suppliers won't be very willing to sell units of the good at that low price. How can we convince suppliers to make more units of the good available? Right, all these people would like to buy it, but there's only relatively few available. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is demanders are going to say, well, wait a second. we would like more of this good, and we'd like to be, and we're willing to pay more for it. And they will start bidding against other demanders, right? Some demanders will compete against other demanders. You can say here about a farmer's market with a limited, where say apples are priced very low, and lots of people want to buy them, and sellers aren't selling very many of them, and there's a line begins to form. And the apple people waiting in line for the apple selling, someone says, well, wait, if you're selling for $1.25 a bag, I'll pay $2 for it, right? And if you're willing to pay $2 for it, the sellers will say, okay, well, we'll sell for $2. And the sellers might even have apples that they weren't willing to sell at $1.25, apples they say they might have kept for themselves, that they're now willing to sell at $2. And slowly over time, what's going to happen here, right, is that as our buyers begin to bid that price up, suppliers will offer more and more of the good, right? And we'll head back towards that market clearing position, right? As demanders push up the price, some people will say, well, wait, now I can't afford the good anymore. Suppliers will say, well, we're willing to supply more at that higher price, and eventually we'll head back towards market clearing. Same thing if the price starts out above market clearing, right? If the price starts out above market clearing, say up here, right, we'll have lots of people willing to supply the good, but not many people interested in purchasing it. So what's going to happen here? The suppliers are going to say, hey, we can't seem to sell all these goods we brought to market. We're going to start to lower the price and induce more buyers in. Now some buyers will say, well, at that price, I'm willing to buy. And as the sellers compete with other sellers to lower their price, it will induce more buyers in. We head back towards market clearing. The important point about all of this coordination between supply and demand, two important points really are the following. First of all, you have to remember that the competition here is among suppliers and among demanders. Demanders don't compete with suppliers. Demanders compete with other demanders, right? Those people waiting in line for apples are competing with each other to get their hands on those bags of apples. And suppliers compete with other suppliers. They're trying to lower their price to induce more people to buy their product than the product of someone else. So demanders compete with demanders. Suppliers compete with other suppliers. The other thing, the second thing to remember, is markets have a natural tendency to go back to market clearing when the price goes above or below that market clearing price. We saw when it's below, demanders tend to bid it up and push it back to market clearing. When the price is above market clearing, suppliers will begin to lower the price to try to induce in more buyers. That will push it back towards market clearing. That market clearing price and quantity, sometimes called the equilibrium price and quantity, markets tend toward that. Markets tend toward coordination. If we don't interfere with them, if we don't prevent prices from moving around, if we can find ways to make sure we have good institutions that keep transaction costs low, suppliers and demanders will coordinate with each other, and they will find ways to make sure that that market's clear. It's only when we interfere with this process from the outside, that we try to freeze prices into place, or we try to get particular outcomes we think we can get through public policy and the political process, that we mess up that process of market clearing. And in Chapter 6, we'll look at some examples of this and see what happens when public policy interferes with that process of market clearing, and how that creates unintended consequences that are problematic. So that's what we'll look at in Chapter 6. But for Chapter 5, the key insight here, again, is that leaving supply and demand to itself will enable buyers and sellers to coordinate with each other and to clear markets.